Top 5 Australian Bank Robberies. 1984 Sydney Bank Robbery. On the 31st of January 1984, 35-year-old Turkish-born Akari Bahadir Atan had robbed 3 banks, the third of which became known as the 1984 Sydney Bank Robbery and Hostage Crisis. After the first 2 robberies, Atan set his sights on the Commonwealth Bank in George Street, Sydney. A quick response ensued, with police on high alert after the first 2 incidents. Police then quickly surrounded the bank almost instantly. Negotiators managed to get Atan to release all the female hostages. He then went to surround himself with the remaining male hostages, each of them with a hand placed covering the robber's head. The male hostages and Atan then entered a waiting getaway car, leading police on a high-speed pursuit that would last for more than 2 hours, involving almost 40 chasing vehicles. Finally, Atan, stopped by a raised split bridge, was then ordered at gunpoint to surrender. Atan's response was to draw his pistol and fire 1 round into a detective senior constable's face. Miraculously, the detective survived the injury. A hail of police gunfire brought a stop to the dramatic event, with the robber's death being the only casualty of the siege. The Great Ghan Robbery. Although this next one is not a bank, it made the list because when many think of train robberies, the American West is usually what comes to mind. However, many train robberies happened on Australia's remote train lines in the early days of the country's settlement. The greatest of these being the robbery in 1935 of the Express, known locally as the Ghan. A mailbag containing 15 kilograms of gold ingot was placed into the train safe, but when the safe was opened at its destination, the gold had mysteriously vanished. 2 guards aboard for the trip reported nothing out of the ordinary, and were fined measly sums for their incompetence. The true thief has never been caught, although it's speculated a duplicate key was used to open the safe, indicating the thief had knowledge of security procedures or an association to the train company. Bank of New South Wales Robbery. One of the most recognisable characters in Australian law, Ned Kelly, together with his gang members Dan Kelly, Steve Hart and Joe Bryan, robbed the Bank of New South Wales in 1879. The Kelly gang cunningly walked into the town of Geraldine dressed as police officers to prevent the alarm being raised. Once they surprised the town's 2 constables into surrender, they locked them into a large room. Others from the gang cut telegraph lines, preventing any calls for help. With the town locked down and large sums of hostages being held in the motel, Ned cased the bank, stealing upwards of £2,100, or over $300,000, factoring in for inflation. Little fight was put up by the bank staff, and once the bank was emptied, the gang refreshed themselves with a few drinks from the hotel, took a few of the horses, and casually strolled out of town. Murwillumbah Bank Heist. This next robbery occurred 100 years later at another branch of the Bank of New South Wales in 1978. The men responsible have never been caught, making it still one of the biggest unsolved crimes in Australian history. The criminals were given the nickname the Magnetic Drill Gang due to their apparent use of a large electromagnet attached to the side of a safe, which then held in place a diamond-tipped drill. They used this apparatus to drill a small hole in the safe, which then a cystoscope was inserted, allowing them to manipulate the tumblers and open the lock. The thieves worked through the night of November 22nd, and by the time morning came, the vault was completely cleared. A total of $1.7 million in untraceable bills was stolen. No trace of the thieves or the money ever turned up, despite a reward of $250,000 offered for any information leading to an arrest. The gang was also believed to be responsible for a string of other robberies in Sydney and Melbourne, totaling $1 million. Bank of Australia Heist. The Bank of Australia Heist was one of Australia's greatest robberies, reminiscent of a Hollywood movie. In 1828, convicts Valentine Rourke, John Wilford, William Blackstone, James Dingle, and George Farrell cemented their place in Australian outlaw history, pulling off a skillful and well-planned theft of over £13,000, or roughly $3 to $4 million in today's currency. The gang of 5 convicts, each with selected skills and trades, tunneled underground through a drain, and then passed the vault wall over a period of a few weeks. The crew was extremely careful not to make much noise, and the whole process to carve the 1.5 meter distance must have been painstakingly slow. For almost 3 years the crime went unsolved until a crew member, Blackstone, undergoing a life sentence for other crimes, agreed to sell out his former gang members in exchange for a free pardon and passage to England. 2 of the remaining 4 men were brought to face justice. Farrell and Dingle were brought to the Supreme Court, and both men were sentenced to death. Although they escaped the gallows because Blackstone's admission was ruled unadmissible due to the confession coming in exchange for the escape of a death penalty, a legal concern called convict attain. Did you enjoy this video? Give it the thumbs up and let me know in the comments section if there's a list that you would like to see.